And it begins exactly where you would expect, in the dark. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off, or the darkness of a cloudy night. Imagine nothing. No space, no sound, no time. Just an endless, silent void where even the concept of emptiness had not yet been named. Now ask yourself the question that philosophers, scientists, and ordinary people have wrestled with across every culture and every century of recorded history. Why does anything exist at all? It is one of the most honest questions a human being can ask, and it has never had an easy answer. The creation story found in the opening pages of the Bible is one of the most well-known narratives in all of human history, and yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Long before written language, before monuments were carved or cities were built, human beings looked up at the sky and asked the same questions we still ask today. Where did all of this come from? Why are we here? What does any of it mean? Every culture across every continent developed stories to answer these questions, not because people were naive, but because the questions themselves were unavoidable. The hunger for meaning is not a weakness. It is one of the most defining features of being human. The creation story found in the opening pages of Genesis was not written to win a debate. It was written to offer something quieter and more enduring than an argument. It was written to provide orientation, to help people understand where they stood in relation to everything around them. That is where our journey begins, in the stillness before everything, where something extraordinary is about to unfold. And in that stillness, something begins to shift at the edges of the dark. That is how it starts. No argument, no lengthy explanation, no attempt to convince a skeptical audience or silence a doubting mind, just a quiet, confident declaration that existence has a starting point. Something came before nothing gave way to something. What makes this opening so striking is not its complexity, but its stillness. Most ancient creation stories begin with conflict, with gods at war, with chaos resisting order. This one begins with calm authority. That distinction, quiet as it seems, changes everything about what follows. The text describes the earth as without form and void, covered in deep darkness. To a modern reader, this might sound like simple emptiness. But in the ancient world, darkness carried far greater weight. It was not merely the absence of light. It was a symbol of chaos, of the unknown, of everything that resisted order and meaning. Many ancient cultures told creation stories that began with violent conflict, gods battling monsters, chaos defeated through war. What makes this story different is its tone. There is no battle here, no struggle, no enemy to overcome. Chaos has been given its first boundary, and meaning has taken its first step forward. Light arrives. But this is not light as a weapon, not a force tearing through darkness in some cosmic battle. It is something quieter and far more intentional. It is an act of separation, a drawing of a line between what was tangled together. Light and darkness are divided, given their own space, their own identity. Darkness is not destroyed or condemned. It is simply no longer confused with what light is meant to be. This is the first act of order in the story, and it begins not with force, but with clarity. Watch as that golden warmth begins spreading slowly across the void, unhurried, deliberate, like the first breath of something that has always known exactly what it was doing. What makes this first act of creation so philosophically rich is not the light itself, but what the light represents. Before this moment, everything existed in a state of undifferentiated confusion, where nothing could be named, measured, or understood. The arrival of light did not destroy the darkness. It simply gave each its own place, its own identity, its own boundary. That distinction matters deeply. Order, as this story presents it, is not something forced upon the world through domination or violence. It is something established through intention and care. Clarity does not arrive loudly. It arrives gently, the way understanding sometimes settles into a restless mind after long confusion. This is the quiet power of the first creative act. Chaos is not defeated, it is simply given shape. Meaning does not erase uncertainty. It simply offers a framework within which uncertainty can be held with purpose rather than fear. From light and darkness, the story moves forward into something even more tangible: structure. The sky stretches above, land rises from below, and the waters are gathered and separated with quiet intention. What seems like simple geography carries enormous weight when understood through an ancient lens. For people living thousands of years ago, the world was not a safe or predictable place. Floods came without warning. Storms erased entire communities. The sea represented chaos, something vast and untamable. Against that backdrop, this vision of a world where waters have boundaries, where land holds firm, and where the sky sits calmly overhead was not just poetic, it was profoundly reassuring. This was not a world left to chance. It was a world being shaped with care and deliberate purpose. Every boundary drawn was a statement that chaos does not have the final word. Order does. Every detail suggests that the world we inhabit was not an accident, but an intention. Each stage arrives in sequence, one building upon the next, as though following a design that was already complete before the first word was spoken. Nothing appears out of order. Nothing is skipped or rushed past. There is a rhythm here that feels almost musical, a steady and unhurried progression that gives each element its proper place before moving forward. Land does not appear before sky. Life does not emerge before the conditions for life are ready. This is not the picture of a world thrown together in haste. It is the picture of something carefully thought through, deliberately shaped, and intentionally ordered. The landscapes forming across the horizon carry that same sense of patience. Mountains rise slowly, waters settle into their boundaries. They are simply called the greater light and the lesser light, functional, purposeful, but not divine. The sun, the moon, and the stars take their places across the sky, each one positioned with intention and purpose. But to truly understand what this moment meant, you have to step back into the ancient world surrounding it. Civilizations across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and beyond did not simply admire the stars. They worshipped them. The sun was a god. The moon carried divine authority. The stars were powers to be feared, appeased, and consulted. Into that world, the creation story makes a quietly radical statement. The sun, moon, and stars are not gods. They are not divine rulers demanding worship. It became an act of orientation, wonder, and calm reverence towards something far greater than the stars themselves. They were given a purpose far more grounded and far more practical. The sun would govern the day, the moon the night, and together with the stars, they would mark seasons, days, and years. Time itself becomes something meaningful within this framework. It is not an endless, indifferent cycle, but a structured rhythm that humanity can live within and understand. This is where the creation story makes one of its quietest, yet most profound statements. In a world where neighboring cultures bowed before the stars as divine rulers, this story quietly repositioned them as instruments of order. Not gods, but guides. Not powers to appease, but patterns to observe. That subtle shift carried enormous weight in the ancient world. The world is no longer empty or formless. It is full, dynamic, and unmistakably alive, pulsing with energy from every direction. Plants begin to grow from the earth, not scattered randomly, but spreading with purpose and variety. The seas fill with creatures of every kind, and birds take to the open sky in sweeping, graceful movement. What is striking here is the sheer abundance of it all. The creation story does not describe a world with just enough life to survive. It describes a world overflowing with it. Every environment becomes home to something living, something moving, something breathing. This is not a static painting, but a living, breathing world in constant motion. The diversity of life is not accidental in this telling, it is intentional. Abundance, diversity, and vitality are not side effects of creation. They are its very intention. There is no hesitation, no reluctance, no sense that life is being rationed or carefully limited. Instead, the world described here overflows with vitality. Plants spread across the land in endless variety. Creatures fill the waters in countless forms. Birds rise into the open sky in great numbers. This is not a world being given the bare minimum to survive. This is a world being invited to flourish. The creation story presents life as something generous by nature, something that wants to expand, grow, and fill every available space with meaning and movement. They are small against the vastness of creation, yet somehow central to its meaning and its unfolding story. Not as an afterthought, not as a late addition squeezed into the final moments, but as the deliberate culmination of everything that came before. The creation story introduces a remarkable phrase, made in the image of God. And it is important to understand what this does not mean. It is not referring to physical appearance, to a body or a face. The ancient writers were pointing to something far deeper than that. To be made in the image of God means to carry within you the capacity for responsibility, for creativity, for moral awareness, and for genuine care. It means that humans are not simply another creature wandering through a world that does not notice them. Human silhouettes stand in wide open landscapes, surrounded by soft and expansive light. They are present within it, surrounded by light, dignified by their responsibility. The creation story does not hand humanity a deed of ownership over the earth. It hands them a responsibility to tend, to care, to nurture. These are the words that define the human role in this story, and they are fundamentally different from the language of conquest or control. A ruler who owns can take without consequence. A caretaker who tends must consider what they leave behind. The creation story quietly but firmly places humans in that second category. Not above the world, looking down with indifference, but within it, moving gently and with purpose. And in that breathing, it suggests that rest is not something earned after value. Rest is value. It does not end with a triumph or a dramatic declaration of victory. It ends with rest. This is not accidental. Rest is woven into the conclusion as something sacred, something that carries the same weight as every act of creation that came before it. In a world that measures worth through output and achievement, this ending quietly challenges everything. Rest here is not the absence of purpose. It is the fullness of it. It is what completion actually looks like. To pause, to be still, to simply exist within what has been made, this is presented as meaningful in itself. The sunrise fills the horizon slowly. Together, they form a quiet but enduring statement that existence itself, in all its complexity, is not a mistake. The world is called good, not perfect, not flawless. Good. That distinction matters more than it might first appear. A perfect world would leave no room for growth, no space for meaning, no need for care. But a good world, a meaningful world, is one worth inhabiting, worth tending, worth understanding. The creation story does not promise that everything will go smoothly or that suffering has no place. It simply declares that what exists has value, that the foundation beneath everything is not chaos or cruelty, but goodness. Rest and goodness arrive together at the close of this story. So what exactly is the creation story? Step back for a moment and consider it not as a scientific account, but as a worldview, a lens through which an entire civilization understood existence itself. Science is extraordinary at answering how things work. But there are questions it does not ask. Is the world meaningful? Is chaos the final word on reality? Do human beings actually matter in the grand scheme of things? These are not questions a telescope or a microscope can answer. They are questions of meaning, not measurement. The creation story was never trying to compete with science. It was doing something entirely different. It was offering a framework for understanding why existence feels significant, why order feels right, and why human life carries weight. As these earlier images return to the screen, notice how each moment in the story quietly addressed one of these deeper questions, not with argument, but with narrative. The creation story answers those questions with quiet confidence. Order matters. The world is not a random accident spinning toward meaninglessness. Life matters. Every living thing exists within a framework of intention and care, not by chance or indifference. And human choices matter. The story places responsibility in human hands, suggesting that what people do with the world genuinely counts for something. This is not a small claim. In a world that often feels chaotic and indifferent, the creation story offers a different framework entirely, one where existence carries dignity, where life has weight, and where purpose is woven into the fabric of reality itself. The symbolic imagery returning to the screen now is not accidental. Light, water, sky, land, and life all connect back to one another, forming a coherent whole. This is not a collection of separate events. It is one continuous story about meaning, not demanding a specific answer, but asking a timeless question that every generation must sit with in its own way. Not as accidents drifting through an indifferent universe, but as beings living within something purposeful and ordered. That is no small thing. Whether you receive this story literally, as a historical account of how things began, or symbolically, as a profound meditation on meaning and existence, both approaches carry genuine value. Neither reading is without depth. What matters most is the invitation the story extends, quietly and without force, to pause and reflect, to ask where we fit within something far larger than our individual lives, to consider whether the world around us carries meaning worth honoring. As soft golden light begins to fill the screen, that invitation remains open. And so we return to where we began, not with answers that silence every question, but with a story that has carried humanity through its deepest uncertainties for thousands of years. This has been the creation story, explained calmly, not argued, not defended, simply told with the stillness it deserves. From the opening void to the final rest, every moment in this story points toward the same quiet truth, that existence is not an accident, that life is not meaningless, and that you are not simply here by chance. The golden light fades now, returning to the darkness from which it came, completing the circle. What you do with this story is yours to decide. Whether you hold it literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, the invitation remains open, to pause, to reflect, and to consider your place within something far greater than yourself. Thank you for watching.